Kia ora koutou, katoa iho mā, no mai, haere mai, ki te pāpatakaro or StayMe Always. Bring it to you organic, live and dynamic. So bring me your cups, cheers, and let's dip into the healing well.
Cheers, big ears.
Flap, flap. On our last episode, we spoke about relationships and the challenges people were facing with the mixed bag of archetypes. A world where we're forever confronted with new pressures and trying to navigate in this evolving and dynamic real time, forcing us to adjust. To continue on, I want to have this discussion in regards to relationship, and what I want to do is really open it up and talk about emotional behaviors and reactors. But before we get into the detail, into the crux of all that information, that detail, how are you, Anne-Me?
I am fantastic. I was battling the traffic before our recording, and traffic has just increased on the Gold Coast. It's like I'm living in New York City, tropical New York City. But yeah, I made it on time.
Oh, good. You look relaxed. You look and feel relaxed now.
Zen,
actually.
Zen.
Hence my glass, but that's okay. We'll talk about that later. Mr. Teaser Created, how are you? Have you had a busy day or have you been relaxing?
A bit of both, actually. So, just been working on my products. For those of you who don't know, I create wellness products, and that's to help me with my personal therapy. Because I've been learning that music is actually my personal therapy, and I've inadvertently done that for the last 20 years. And I'm only just becoming aware of the things that I create, and it's actually my sixth sense that imbues or inspires me to do these things, because it's my personal therapy. And so I've been working on that, and then just sleeping. Sleeping because I'm getting some major NLP, and I'm gonna do a plug for you, Anne-Me. So I started with my chronic depression, and I'm speaking about this openly because I know that there are people all over the world who are suffering from all kinds of mental illnesses. And as much as I don't like to use that word, it is what it is. And so this show is focused around spiritual harmony, mental well-being, and then emotional wellness. And so I'm speaking on these things on behalf of myself and everybody else out there, because I am not the only one, and I know tons of people who have suffered from depression, and I've only just been basically diagnosed with it since I've been back here in New Zealand for the last 5 months. And so that's the new journey that I'm on. And I'm just getting a little bit emotional, so I'm just trying to contain it. So I came back because my beautiful friend, aka whatever you want to call that, StayMe Always, I came back and she healed me. She helped to heal me. She was a massive cog in that, probably the biggest. And then Anne-Me has been chipping in without even knowing whilst we've been doing the show. And then yesterday I had my first NLP session with Anne-Me, and she absolutely expunged one of the biggest contributors to my chronic depression. So in 2002, I was diagnosed with other nervous system disorders, because back then they didn't know what depression was. It wasn't even in the incipient stages. And so I just want to openly talk about what these two women have done for me, and why I champion wahine women all over the world, because they are actually bringing the feminine to the fore, and they're making it so available that men like me can stop being staunch and stop being macho and actually tap into this to love. And I'm gonna be reading lots of scripture tonight, based on the first 7 years where it all starts and how all that unfolds, and I'm sure StayMe Always is going to elaborate on that. And of course, only, you know, like I always say, I'm the trailer on the back of the lorry.
And a lot of what we're going to be talking about really does stem to and will resonate with a lot of people. And you know, talking with TZ about his experiences, and even with Unme, it's really important that we really emphasize that, you know, the show is all about support. It's about really making people aware of what's happening out in the day-to-day trials and tribulations, the struggles that people are facing, but they don't really realize that this is the disruption that's causing them, unfortunately. You know, sorry, my daughter's friend's ringing me. But it's the type of disruption that people, unfortunately, are not taking the time to actually put attention into, and hence why there's so much disruption around, you know, emotional issues, relationship problems, family situations, abuse, violence. And this is why the show is so important, so we can really tap into those key areas to help you and give you the recipe to build awareness and help give you the steps to work towards healing. And, you know, Unme, you're absolutely amazing in terms of who you are, what you stand for, your journey and what you do, that, you know, we're very blessed to have you on the show. And I thank you so much for your time, because, you know, you don't understand the effect it's actually having on myself as well as TZ. And again, a massive thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Half and half.
A gratitude session. So look, we want to really focus on relationships, and from the last show we wanted to talk about jealousy and insecurity. And look, I was sitting at my kitchen table this morning writing notes about the show, and I really started to think about, you know, jealousy. What does jealousy actually mean? Insecurity, what does insecurity mean? Self-worth, what does that mean? And even self-confidence, you know, what does self-confidence mean? To me, all those four key areas actually are intertwined and actually come and work together hand in hand. And I was pondering for a while about these types of behaviors, and that they all have different meanings, you know, dependent upon the situation. And I asked myself, if I was to actually isolate the word itself, jealousy, insecurity, self-worth, and self-confidence, what do these words actually mean? And I came up with a description that really resonated with me, which I felt was really important to share with everybody, because it's all actually intertwined, but yet they are so different and they are very separate to one another. And I came up with, it's a feeling engendered by someone else to make you feel a certain way. Now, if you actually think about that, jealousy and insecurity have a similar annotation and similar in where it sits, and then self-worth and self-confidence in turn is the opposite. But before we get into the detail of every single one of those words, Unme, what's your perception, or what do you think about the description in terms of those four key behavioural reactors and emotions? What's your thought? What do you think about that?
All of these feelings are responses to how you perceive the outside world. So basically, it has nothing to do with anyone else. It has all to do with you. And the way people respond to, because that's exactly what it is. So emotions and feelings are basically buttons that get pushed. I'm just trying to think how to explain this in a simple way. because we are in a world, right? We don't only exist on our own. We participate in a larger world, including people, animals, society, institutions that we are, or basically pushed in to be part of, like schools, for example. And when you are sick, you need to go to the hospital. That's another thing that, we are told it's an institution that we need to take part in. Or I mean, you don't have to, but 99.9% of the people do. So it's a world where we are just a very small component and everything is happening around us. So then when things start to happen in that world, we see this as a good or a bad thing. Because I believe it's Einstein that said, if you see the world as an evil happening, then that's how you're going to perceive the world. If you see the world as a source of happiness and abundance, that's what's going to happen to you. That's what you're going to meet. So basically, jealousy. What was the other one?
We've got jealousy, insecurity.
Jealousy and insecurity, those are feelings that occur when you interact with the world as a person. And it basically depends, it starts with when you start to compare yourself to others. So now in Buddhism, they teach you should never compare yourself. You do not compare an orange and a fruit, an orange and a banana. They are both fruits. They are both different. But the orange is not going to say to the banana, "Oh, why are you yellow and I am orange?" So it's the same with people. But unfortunately, the world we live in, and if we go back in time, it's actually from the beginning of times, people were comparing each other to, comparing themselves to other people. And that's where you can see the differences. So instead of aiming on the similarities, what we have in common, because if you look at somebody else, everyone has two ears, two eyes, a nose. Everyone has, there is way more similar than there is different. But unfortunately, we are told between 0 and 7, because not necessarily that your parents are going to tell you, hey, you need to look for differences. No, but it comes out in their speech, in the way that they behave, in their role modeling. Kids think, oh, my mom says that this child is, like taller than me, or skinnier than me, or I am skinnier than her. And then it starts all with comparing. And then jealousy is basically the negative feeling for fear. Because in psychology, there is only two feelings, and that is love and fear. And under fear, there is jealousy, insecurity, envy, basically any negative feeling that you can find. And for love, that is joy, fulfillment, contentment, happiness. So it all comes back to these two basic feelings. But in conclusion, insecurity and jealousy are responses that you experience and that you create because you feel like an attack from the world against you. That's basically how it is.
No, I agree. And I was thinking about, and I was reading a book too by Joyce Meyer, and I've been watching quite a lot of different sermons on YouTube. And she was talking a lot about, comparing and competing, which is exactly what you were talking about as well. And TZ created, in terms of, if you were to isolate the words jealousy, insecurity, self-worth, and self-confidence, what do those four key behaviors, emotional behaviors, reactors, and as Anmi said, responses, what do they mean to you?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I'm just going to read an excerpt and then answer those questions. So the writer of this is quite famous, and he wrote this excerpt. When it comes to child development, it's been said that the most crucial milestones in a kid's life occur by the age of 7. In fact, the Greek philosopher Aristotle once said, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." And so based on that and a raft of other corroborating evidences, we are always going to go back to the first 7 years, because that's when the mind is shaped. That's where the emotions are also shaped, because your emotions are inextricably connected to your mind. And so when you're growing up, you're learning from the adults who are around you. And they actually don't even need to be next to you teaching you and planting thoughts in your head. You can gain those thoughts by their actions. And as the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words. And so it's actually more about how people react to certain situations, but then obviously you need context for that. And the context comes in the knowledge that they feed you. And so if they're feeding you all the things that are not directly connected to love, well, then you're going to get the opposite, which is what you alluded to, and me, and to you, StayMe Always. It's fear. And unfortunately, fear, it conjures up all the negative connotations. It conjures up jealousy. It conjures up insecurity. And I'm going to speak to insecurity tonight. So when I first came back here, I came from mining. Is that the only thing that I can do? No. But it was at the time. And so I was insecure because I wasn't building anything. And yet I've built a multi-million-dollar business in the past. I've been a Sony music artist in the past. I've been at the heights of what most people can only dream of, and yet I'm back here in New Zealand. I am not building anything, and I'm still feeling insecure. And I've hung out with some of the biggest stars in the world at different times, and even they go through the same things. I'm not going to name any names, but a good friend of mine who used to drive cars, that's all I'm going to say, he used to have the same insecurity issues, and at the time he was a world champion in what he does. And for me, fear and insecurity and jealousy, they don't discriminate, because ultimately it comes back to the first 7 years. Who taught you? Why would people even teach you what jealousy is? Does that even need to be taught? Does fear even need to be taught? Does insecurity even need to be taught? Why would we teach our young people these? Why would we teach children these things? Why would we continue that pernicious cycle? Because that's all it does. It just acts as a fatal, ruinous mechanism to society. And actually, we need to stamp it out. So if I was going to say anything to our listeners out there, stamp out fear, man. Fear is a disease. And I watched a movie not so long ago called Apocalypto. And I remember there was a particular scene in there where the father was talking to his son, because his son was having these dreams and they were making him fearful. And his father was about to be decapitated, but he was fearless when he was faced with that proposition. And he said to his son, he said, Ingwa, which was his name. I don't know what language they were speaking, probably some kind of dialect of Espanol and the Aztecs. But he said to him, do not be scared. Do not bring fear into our village. Do not bring fear into the minds of these young people. Fear is a disease. And that's how we need to view fear. And we need to steer our rangatahi, our young people, away from fear, because fear only brings negativity in people's lives.
Yep, no, I totally agree. And as we talk more and delve more so into the detail of what each one of these key areas and reactors and responses, emotional reactors and responses mean, it's going to sit differently for everybody, because there's 3 opinions that we have and that we're putting out there, because ultimately, do these 3 opinions, is there a right and a wrong answer? Absolutely not. It all comes down to how you perceive, how you understand, and then it's about what you do then going forward. I looked at jealousy and insecurity, and I made the decision to call them frown thinking. It's an emotional negative, and then self-worth and self-confidence calling it smile thinking, which is more positive self-thinking. So again, it's going to come down to your perception, your understanding. But what I wanted to do is really just give a more clearer view in terms of how I perceive and I understand these emotions and these responses. And like I've been saying since the start, I've really sat there and I started thinking deeper to understand how these emotional reactors, how they're embedded in us. We were brought into this world not to fear, just like TZ Created mentioned just beforehand, not to feel insecure, not to feel unsafe and feel jealous, etc. But why do we have these feelings? Where does it actually start? And again, we've all mentioned, and in our past shows, that the first 7 years are imperative in terms of how we view life, how we see life, and how we actually determine our steps and what we do going forward. So it brings to the same conversation again, who are our teachers, who are our guardians, how are we taught, and even going deeper, as we said, how we perceive and understand perceptions. I know on me, like, it's same but different in terms of what we're talking about. And I was looking here, and I actually jumped on Auntie. I'm going to say Auntie, not Uncle. I'm sick of everyone saying Uncle Google. Auntie Google. And I actually looked up what the actual meaning of jealousy meant, and hence why I mentioned before, if I was to isolate the actual word and not put a situation in, and not use a situation in this case, because the word will actually mean something different. It says here, and I'm going to read it word for word, what is the exact meaning of jealous? An unhappy or angry feeling of wanting to have what someone else has. And then it says an unhappy or angry feeling caused by the belief that someone you love, such as your husband or wife, likes or is liked by someone else. Now, I had conflicting thoughts about that because I agree, but yet I disagree to what they're saying. I kind of want to get your view on this, Unme, in terms of what we're talking about, the actual meanings of things. Again, how that first 7 years comes into play, who teaches us, is who teaches us and who our guardians are. Do they shape our perception and how to perceive things going forward?
100%. So why are we going into that a little bit deeper? So between 0 and 7, so we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind, people say subconscious mind, really? Do I have one? Actually, you do. And you use it for 95%. I repeat this. 95% is your subconscious mind. You're operated by your subconscious mind for 99%. I'll prove this to you. Do you think when you go to sleep, do you think, oh, I think I inhaled 365,000 times and I exhaled? Do you think about that? No. Do you think about, oh, my blood streams through my veins? Do you think about my hair is growing? Oh, yeah, it's growing. You don't think about these things. So these 95% of your body and your mind are operated subconsciously. And you have 5% is the conscious mind. And so that's why when you need to make a change in your life, you're not going to do that with your conscious mind because your subconscious mind is much stronger. Yeah. So your 5% of your conscious mind is just there as your instinct to keep you safe. That is your prehistoric caveman, sorry, wrong direction, caveman brain that is there if there is some sort of danger coming up in your life. So now we live in 2021. We don't have tigers that are going to kill us anymore, or we don't have those kind of threats. We have different kinds of threats. Yeah. So of course, and our brain is adjusted to that change. Now going back to everything that we are today in our adult life is due to what we have experienced between 0 and 7. So I was explaining to you about the subconscious mind for a reason. So between 0 and 7, the subconscious mind of a child is operating at a very special wavelength. It's at the wavelength of hypnosis. So now, if you know anything about hypnosis, it is the power how you can change if you make your brain or your subconscious mind work at that specific wavelength. You can reprogram your mind very quick. That's why hypnosis helps people to stop smoking from one day to the other. I know people that were smoking one packet a day. They walk out of here, they don't smoke ever again. They call me, how disgusting. I feel like vomiting when I walk past a smoker. Excellent. You did a fantastic job allowing me to reprogram your subconscious mind. Good luck in your life, being healthy and happy. And so our children between 0 and 7, their mind is operating at a specific vibration, and that kind of dwindles out. For some kids that goes on to till 9, but there is a transition between 7 and 9, and then they are using different vibrations, so there is less influence possible on the brain. So then I wanted to say something about fear. Fear is definitely fear should only be there when you are really in danger, not to judge other people or to compare yourself to others. And then this is a very big one, to feel that you don't belong, because feeling that you don't belong is created by society to create outcast and to divide and conquer. So we belong. Everyone belongs here. You have chosen to be here in this life where you are. That was your choice. It might not look like that because you've been conditioned so much. Because yesterday I was thinking about they say versus I know. Which one gives you the most certainty? They say who, when, what, based on what? But I know. That is certainty, right? And that is really something to think about. And what I want to say to parents listening right now, the vocabulary that you use around your children and to yourself is huge. It will set them up for life. So be very wary of what you say. It's better to say less than too much. So the belonging is a huge thing. And then going back to, because, I never get the questions beforehand. So things start to kind of like brew in my mind, as in I need to touch on that, I need to say that, because I have a huge library in my mind here that I want to talk about for hours, but I need to select the appropriate information for you here. So what comes to mind when you say, when you're talking about fear, and then going back to insecurity and jealousy, this stems from a thinking of lack, not abundance. So if you really want to change your life, and I'm going to say this again, if you really want to change your life, you need to shift your thinking from lack to abundance.
Yeah. Bring it, sis. Bring it, man.
And this is something that you can do as well. And then, like many people and psychologists and the medical, world, and I have nothing against them because, I have needed them as well to have surgery, and fantastic, great. Thanks to the doctors and the nurses and everyone who cares for others. I think it's an amazing job, but we need to see it way more holistic. The mind is so much stronger than the body. So once you condition your mind to think in abundance than in lack, because I know women, I'm actually coaching a woman here. She's a millionaire. She has 2 companies. She was seeing her relationship as lack, her money as lack. She had not enough. There was and I said, can you write down what you have? And I said, take 5 days because you're going to need these 5 days. And then we're going to talk again. And from the moment you can make that shift in your mind, that you can see that this has nothing to do with money, by the way, but if you can shift your mind to an abundance more will come to you. If you keep thinking that you don't have enough or you don't have it, automatically your mind is going to default back to lack.
Yes.
And you're going to have less and less, and you're going to experience less and less love. That's not what you want. So you want to focus on abundance, not lack.
Agreed. And before I just throw it back over to Teasy, because I know we have spoken about this in depth. Have we got to a point where it's become heated conversations? Absolutely. But I just want to touch on what you were saying about parents. One exercise that I've started to do with my own children, because I'm one of those. I think lack versus abundance, but it's the understanding, the awareness that you need to I suppose bring in, and it's by listening to others, it's understanding, it's reading more, it's exposing yourself to information, where now I'm thinking to myself, I need my girls to understand what words actually mean, so that when I'm talking to them and I'm conversating, they actually have a clear understanding, because that's the problem that we also have, hence why I brought in the conversation around perception and perceiving things. So now what we do is we get my phone out, because the girls love the bloody devices, and I'm trying to get them off them, yet I'm encouraging this. But in this way, it's shaping their mind, it's opening them up, it's creating that abundance and understanding in terms of knowledge, so that they can use these types of words going forward. I'll pick a word and I'll ask them to type it in, and we'll actually sit there and I'll say to them, what does that word mean? And they need to read it word for word. Now, obviously, we Google it, yes. If you've got a dictionary, we'll do the dictionary thing as well. But it's just creating more awareness in terms of what words actually mean, because when they come home from school, my teacher said, and then I'm sitting there going, actually, no, I don't agree with that. But yet, because their teacher said, or mummy said, I don't want the conflicting views to come into play where they start to get confused. So then I say, okay, let's bring up the phone, let's put the words in. And look, I could go on and on and on about this. But again, that's one example that, parents, you could potentially do with your children to help them to, create a bigger vocabulary library. And it's really just about giving them more awareness in terms of what words actually mean, so that they've got a bit more of an understanding. But for you, TC, again, we always talk about perception. We talk about how to perceiving things, what you're actually doing versus how I'm perceiving it doesn't actually mean that there's that intention or initial attention in play. Yeah. Brother, tell us, talk to us, enlighten us.
So I'm going to speak to abundance and speak to the first 7 years, and then the importance that perception plays in abundance and in every facet and aspect of your life, based on what you're taught or what you're not taught when you're between the ages that you come out of your mother's womb and the first 7 years of your life. So I'm going to talk about Schumann resonances, which is something that we spoke about last night on Aroha Khan. So these are standing waves known as Schumann resonances, and they are the base atmospheric electromagnetic frequency, and it is 7.83 hertz. Now that can't be a coincidence, because you're talking about the first 7 years. A child is operating at that spectrum, between 7 and 7.83 hertz. That's what's been recorded in science, according to this particular excerpt. And so what's happening is, because a child's resonant frequency is exactly the same as the atmospheric electromagnetic frequency, that's how they're taking everything in, because they're so aligned with what's actually going on in nature, and their senses are absolutely attuned to what's going on in nature. And I always say this, and I've said this to my mum, I've said this to every single adult: do not place your limitations on children, because they have no limitations.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had that limitation inculcated into their mind. And so what we actually do as adults is we limit their thinking, because our thinking is limited.
Amen, brother.
And our thinking is limited because we've been around other adults whose thinking is limited. And then their thinking is limited because the adults that they were taught by. And so it's this pernicious cycle. It's this pernicious hamster wheel. And so what we actually do is we have to pull ourselves off it, pull our children off it, and let their senses do the work because they're created. And this is why I call myself TZ created, because I know I'm created. I know everything is created, and it's created by the Most High, by Yahuwah, whatever you want to call him, God, whatever, the universe. There is a superior, intelligent being orchestrating everything that happens in our world, because there are too many coincidences. Like I did some research on the number 7 today, and there are over 2 billion references to 7 in the general world around us. And so we always talk about this, me and StayMe Always. 1 is the forerunner, 2 is an indicator, 3 is a pattern. How can 2 billion coincidences be coincidences? There's a pattern. There's an orchestrated design, and our world and everything around us is designed by an intelligent, superior being to us, and we are part of that cosmos. And so when I'm speaking about abundance, like, it's real easy for me to have this mindset, because in Matthew 6:33 it says, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." And so when I see people all around the world operating according to the provisions of Holy Scripture, and I see the blessing in their life, and if we go back to the first show, where I did the first show with you and StayMe Always, I spoke about that. I spoke about abundance. I spoke about Yahuwah. If he wants you to have it, he'll give it to you. But there are provisions that you need to adhere to. And so when I see all the spiritual disruption, it's because of wrong spiritual teachings. When I see mental unwellness, it's because of wrong psychological teachings. And then when I see the emotions, because the emotions are a direct result of your spiritual life and your mental life. And if you get those wrong, then your emotions are going to be way out of sync with what they're supposed to be. And so these are the things that I'm speaking to. And from here on in, I'm going to speak from Scripture, and I'm just going to line it up with my life, with people's lives, because I know it's going to resonate with them, because there's another Scripture that talks about the renewal of our minds. And all the answers are in Holy Scripture to everything, because everything is connected. And you always say this, Sunny, everything is connected. And so that's the standpoint that I come from. Why? Because I know it works, because I'm watching it happen in my life. I'm watching abundance happen. I'm watching me come here to New Zealand from Australia with nothing, and I'm watching an empire. I was listening to Joyce Myers this morning with StayMe Always, and she said this out of Scripture: "Do not despise the day of small beginnings, for from them empires have evolved." And so I'm watching it happen in front of my eyes, because I serve the Most High, and he just blesses you and blesses you. From Matthew 6:33, "But seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well." So he gives you everything that your heart's desire. Yeah.
I think we need to make it clear too, and this is being absolutely honest, when we talk about abundance, we're not talking about materialistic here. No. Absolutely not. So, I'd like to think and hope that when you're listening and tuning in, we're not talking about wanting more, as Anmi said, more money, in terms of her example with one of her clients. It's not about the materialistic things. It's got everything to do with, the spiritual and your learnings, your teachings, and that aspect. So, again, I just wanted to add that in. I know we were talking, Anmi, yes?
Yes, no, I wanted to say that's why I picked specifically that lady, because she has so much money. Like, she flies everywhere in first class, but she still felt her relationship was in lack.
Yes.
Right? So you can have everything in the world, and some people, they have a lot of money, but they still live in lack. That's how you feel. That's what it is. It's not necessarily what you have.
The emotional, spiritual side of things. And when I actually look back, I had a life where I was absolutely happy. And again, it's a different scale. I wasn't uber rich by the sounds of it that your your client was. But, you know, if I wanted to go somewhere, I could do it. If I wanted to buy something, you know, money was never a problem, although it didn't actually make me happy. And then I found that, as you were saying, in me, my relationship lacked because I didn't have that emotional connection. I found that it was more focused around wanting those materialistic things that never, ever made me happy. Yeah, everyone says having money makes you happy. Actually, I disagree. And I've had conversations with TZ Created about this. If I had my way, I would rather be poor and know that I loved the people around me, I cherished everyone around me and what we were doing together as a unit, as a family, versus being rich and unhappy, because money doesn't actually bring you happiness. Although to an extent, I will just add that in there for some luxuries. But the point being here is that, you know, ultimately it's that spiritual connection and that emotional connection that you have to yourself and the people around you. Ultimately, that's what's actually going to make you abundant and happy versus lack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Touching on that was very good, because I actually was working with a client in Argentina. Actually, one was here in Australia, the other one is in Argentina, and talking about money and abundance, and money doesn't make you happy. So one client here, so I always coach them together because that's what they want. And so the one here is in Western Australia, and he was saying about, and I know that he's definitely not going to watch this because I want to use it as an example. And he said, money is not important, and everyone, wealth distribution should be equal. And I said to him, well, I have really bad news for you, because if we would take all the money of everybody and we would distribute it equally between the almost 8 billion people on Earth, within 30 days, the money would find its way back to the people who had it in the first place. And he was just gobsmacked. And I said, that is because these people are a vibrational match for that amount of money, and you are not.
Yeah.
And then the other person in Argentina, so whom I'm coaching in the same call, his problem is he has so many debt, and he has no idea where to, to start. I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but it has to do with money and abundance and lack and, thinking. And he just seems to work and work and work and work, and he takes 1 step forward and 3 steps backward and 2 steps forwards and 10 steps backwards. And then we kind of like came to the conclusion that he enjoys being in a shit situation because he gets all this attention from people. So then people send him money, and then he has money, but then he is, like shouting the family to a dinner, or paying something for the family. And that is the collectivist culture. But so basically, this is a two-way working for him. He's basically feeding this situation from 2 ways. Poor me, I am, I'm in debt, I don't have money, so people give him money, people that are in Australia. And then he is the big man because he's going to pay everything for everyone. And I said to him, you're just keeping yourself in the same situation and nothing will ever change. If the way to get out of this situation is to change your mindset, and there is a reason why they say in the airplane, put on the oxygen mask first on yourself and then on somebody else. So you need to first clean up your own life by being responsible. And then when you have excess, you need to think, am I doing these people a favor by giving them money? Or should I teach them how to make it? Because you can give the man a fish for the day and he will not be hungry. But if you teach him how to fish, he will have food for life, right? Because by giving money and giving money, I don't give to charities.
No.
I go to charities and I teach them.
Yes, great. Me too.
So that's just, a little thing about lack and abundance. And I told them, I said, if you want to keep doing what you're doing, keep on going, but you're wasting your time, and actually my time as well, because somebody might want to hop on your spot here and want to move. ahead or along. So, and he was like a bit shocked, like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to go on the call again. Well, yeah, it's about choices. And what I wanted to say is we are sometimes dwelling too much on the past. And where does it come from that we have this kind of feeling or we are in this situation? We should not do that. We should we should investigate, obviously, how we have gotten here, because eventually you're here to learn the lessons and you learn from the past, but we should not dwell on the past. We should see, I am here now, and where I am now is the consequences of the actions that I've taken in the last 5 to 10 years. So which actions and consequences, which actions do I have to take to be in the future where I want to be?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And we control our own actions. Talking about insecurity and jealousy, we have a tendency, and I've learnt over time, I've had so many different experiences where I have put myself in those experiences by choice, not expecting the outcome, because obviously, clearly didn't think that was going to be the outcome. And it's had a direct effect in terms of exactly where I sit now. But I was talking to TZ Created, and I just want to throw this example out, and it's to go back to jealousy and insecurity, where I was in multiple relationships. Well, not when I say multiple, a couple of relationships where I would go out with my partner, we would go to a bar, I would go somewhere, come back, and my partner would be sitting there speaking and talking to other females. And I actually said to TZ, did I become jealous, or the fact of the matter was my partner at the time decided not to acknowledge me because I was standing there listening, all the focus was put into these other females. Does that then make me jealous? Or is that him creating insecurity as to why now I'm feeling jealous? I hope that makes sense. What's your thoughts on that, Anmi? Because I know for a fact almost every female will resonate with everything. Resonate with a G. Resonate with what I'm saying, because it has happened. I have had this happen to me multiple times, and I sat there and I'm just like, I no longer actually have the feelings of jealousy, because I've learnt and I understand what that is.
Yep.
But yeah, I just want to know what everyone else's thoughts are.
I'm going to jump in here, Anmi, if you don't mind. I'm going to answer this from a male's perspective. And for me, I revolve my life around Holy Scripture. That's what makes me different. That's what makes me different to other males, because I'm answerable to a higher power. So we're talking about accountability expert. Well, let's accountability expert this. So I subscribe to a higher power and his ways of doing things. And so when you look at Yahuwah, the God of Israel, the God of this world, he is a jealous God. And we're talking about jealousy. He's a jealous God for his prized position. And his prized position is mankind. And so that's women and men alike, especially children, because there's multiple scriptures that talk about children, where Yahushua HaMashiach, aka Jesus Christ, is talking to his disciples when he's preaching about the kingdom of heaven to multiple people all throughout the land of Judea, all throughout the Levant. And children are trying to come to him. And he actually gives a description of what the kingdom of heaven is actually like. And he says, do not stop these children from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And that's a whole other story altogether. But what he's actually saying to people, because he's teaching about the kingdom of heaven and how the kingdom of heaven is a bride to Yahuwah. And if you look at the history of the Israelites, they were unfaithful to him. And he is always faithful to his people, even when they stuff up. And so when you go back and you read the scripture from Genesis, and it talks about a man leaving his mother and his father and becoming one flesh with his wife, because that's what spiritual marriage is. And that's where people are missing it in this world. It's about spirituality. and it's about the spiritual knowledge that comes from the Creator, from the Most High. And so, because I know these provisions, I would never do a thing like that, because I want to make sure that my partner is absolutely secure. And so I actually make a bone of it, make a point of it to stay away from situations that would engender a negative response from my partner. So I stay away from titty bars. I stay away. Those things I have absolutely no interest in. I'm about eternal things. So I chase eternal things. And this is why people go drinking, and they're always doing something because they're trying to fill the spiritual void in them. But all you really need to do is just get into Holy Scripture, read spiritual stuff, because it starts nourishing your wairua, it starts nourishing your spirit, and then you don't need to do any of those things. And so these are the things that I've learned throughout my chronic depression for the last 20 years, getting into Scripture, delving into the deeper things, the things that are eternal. And so when we speak about how guys deliberately do that to females, that's a kingdom of darkness mentality. That's a kingdom of darkness teaching. And so what you're actually you're having a battle between the kingdom of darkness, which is the voice, that unseen voice that speaks to you to do things that you actually know from your inner compass are wrong. So I'm speaking to spiritual things here, because you want to go by your inner compass, your sixth sense, because your inner compass actually wants you to do what the good voice is telling you to do. But more often than not, when people become conflicted, they're listening to bad teachings. When this is why we keep going back to the 0 to 7 years, because we're going. Men, especially, they emulate what their male guardians do, and their male guardians, they emulate what their male guardians did, and so forth and so forth. And so it actually becomes a generational curse.
And what's your perception of this example that I've put out there?
I love this example, and I think many women will go like, oh yeah, what do I do? Well, for me, a man who does that on purpose. Now, if my husband and I would go to a restaurant or a bar, or I don't know, go out, and I would go to the toilet, for example, I would come back and he would be talking to two women, I would have absolutely no problem with that. But when I join them, he needs to include me immediately, because that's exactly what I do as well. If he would go to the toilet and some of my ex-colleagues, or I don't know, some people that I worked with rock up, or I run into some male clients, I would say immediately like, so-and-so, this is my husband, Kathleen. And, you include them immediately and you give them priority. And I had actually this conversation with a friend. I had a girlfriend that called me and said, like talking, but not getting to the point. Kathleen came home, my husband came home, and he's worked all day, so he wants to go to have sushi or something. And I said to my girlfriend, sorry, I have to hang up because we are going to eat sushi now. She was upset because I had explained, I had said to her I was going to eat dinner with my husband. My husband and my parents, they come first. Unless somebody's, on the verge of killing themselves or committing suicide, yes, I will talk them through it. But for the rest, you need to have priorities in life, So what I would have absolutely no problem, because my husband is a mad surfer and a very, very good surfer. He could easily be a pro surfer if he wanted to. And there is women on the beach. There is women all the time with virtually no clothes on. Do I feel threatened by that? Definitely not, because I know my worth. I know that I'm a very intelligent person. I know that I have qualities that other people don't have. And, you can never find all qualities in one person. That's true. But I feel absolutely not threatened. Now, if I would come back to, from the toilet and he would be sitting there with 2-3 women and just ignore me, he would never have to talk to me again. It's that simple, because that is just my standard is he's the king, I'm the queen. There needs to be mutual respect. And he knows that. He knows that very well. And that is something you need to make very clear in the beginning of your relationship, that this behavior is not acceptable. That is a non-negotiable, that I come first. Is that simple? What I want to say, so that's the woman, how the woman will feel. Now the man, men do this, and I want to explain that to women as well, because men are way more ego-driven than women. So men are feeding their ego because, yeah, look at me, I'm the big man, I'm the big hotshot. I'm sitting here with all these women. So I have heard men say that to women, like, look at me, you're so lucky to have me. And I was, what? I would say that's fine. You don't have me anymore. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one other story. Like I mean, this is far, I'm not that far in the past, but in the past, I was dating a very wealthy Russian, and he had organized this party in the penthouse apartment. So we lived in a beachfront property, and then he had a penthouse apartment for the parties, because I made it clear that I will not have strangers in the middle of the night in the place where I sleep. I need my energy. And he was like, okay, I understand. So after work, I was still working in a school at the time. I drove home, and he's like, we have this party, and I have these girls coming to serve food. And basically, when I went up the stairs to the penthouse, I was the only woman who had clothes on. And I sat there at the big oak shiny table, I remember, and I poured myself a whiskey. And I was sitting there, and first of all, I thought, how the hell did I get here? Secondly, what am I doing here? Basically, I meant in the relationship over the years. And I thought, I'm just gonna watch this, because this is going to this is gonna make a chapter in a very good book. And then these girls are like coming around with food, and then one of these girls sat down next to me and said, don't you feel insecure? Don't you feel like, you know, jealous? And I said, darling, by far not, because I have a brain and I know how to use it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I had absolutely no, I mean, I'm not going to say that I was going to promote that, because I felt sorry for these girls. I felt like saying, here's $200, go and get some clothes. Please, respect yourself. Because women who put up with stuff like that, if everyone would step up and have standards, the men would have zero women to sit at a bar with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree. And this was such a massive learning curve for me, because where I am now, and who I am, and how I see my self-worth and my own self-confidence was so different to the way I was, 20 years ago. A perfect example was I went to a titty bar with my partner, and I was confident knowing going into that bar and that strip joint that I didn't have anything to worry about. Well, that was very quickly quashed, because as soon as we got in there, all of a sudden the attention was drawn to the woman with no clothes on, and I was asking a question, and all of a sudden I was dismissed. And I knew from that point going forward, this was never going to work. And it quashed my confidence. It quashed who I was in terms of where I felt our relationship was at the time with this individual. Unfortunately, I didn't learn from that experience, but I absolutely did as time went by. And hence why I brought self-worth and self-confidence into this conversation, because it's all very much intertwined and works together. And I love the fact that you brought up that in your conversation just before and me. And valuing who you are as an individual, not using other people to decipher who you are, how you should be, how you should think.
First of all, what I want to say, Jamie, I really want to, honor you for being brave to do that. And that experience has taught you a lot, and you can probably share that with your daughters later on to explain that to them. Secondly, obviously the man can never make you feel a certain way. It's you allowing that to come to you. Thirdly, this man is not a real man, because a real man would never do that. Because as we said before, Tizi as well, it is about the king and the queen. The king would never do that to his queen because the queen protects the king, and he should know that, like in chess. So, what I would suggest to all women listening here, and if something like that is going on in your life, can you live with that? Are you happy with that? And I can guarantee nobody is, unless you are lying to yourself. Um, and many people do, many people lie. I have no problems with that. Really? Are you sure about that?
Really.
Anyways, and you need to set, rules for yourself before you start a relationship. You need to set rules. I love that picture. Um, you need to set rules and say this is acceptable and this is not. This is negotiable and this is not negotiable. And for me, disrespect is a non-negotiable. And my husband knows that, and he will never do these kind of things. He knows, and I will. There are certain things that I don't have to do neither. And the last thing that I want to do is make him feel bad, because in a really good relationship you should fill each other's cup to the max, overflowing, so there should never be any issues. That is a good relationship.
Man, I will admit that the learnings that I have gained, the experience over the years, and I sit here and I've got my daughter here, and I, as a parent, you want to ensure that you instill as much, and it's about them understanding their own values, but give them the right morals and values to start life right from the outset. And I would hate to think they would ever get themselves in a situation, but again, if they did, they know that they've got somewhere to go to. But again, like TZ, for you, just based on what we've just talked about, and I know you tell me all the time, and we have discussions around, kingdom and how you perceive things, enlighten us, give us that male's perception in terms of the situations.
Look, for me, I look at how Yahuwah views us, and we are his prized possessions. He adores us so much that his first creations that he created, which was all the angelic hosts, we sit above them. Scripture tells us that we will judge angels in the age to come, because there's an age to come. And so, because I know how he views his bride, because in Scripture tells us how Yahushua HaMashiach, aka Jesus, views the body, and how he loves and cherishes the body like it's his wife. And so that's the way that I am with my partner. I cherish her. She's not my number one priority. She's my only priority. And so I totally resonate with you, Unmi, where you're on the phone to anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. As soon as your husband, for me, my partner, who I view as my spiritual wife, we're already one flesh because of my spiritual views. And so my partner is my number one priority, my only priority. And then everybody else comes a distant second after that. And so, like, do I still love my brother, my grandfather, and the people who are closest to me? Damn Skippy, I still love them. But when you find that person, aka your soulmate, and your life changes because of them, and you spoke about filling each other's cups. And when you find that person where you're filling each other's cups, why wouldn't that become the number one priority? And then people start saying, "Oh, you've changed," or they drop little snide remarks in your text messages. "Oh, you've changed." Well, it's not my fault that your life isn't being fulfilled because of the choices that you make.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's about choices. But how do we make those choices? The first 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And this conversation is going to continue next week. But it's so important that, and again, I'm going to send this out to all the females because I was one of those females. You actually have to make a stand and a decision what you are going to put up with and what you are not, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And you need to actually lay, the grounding in terms of what that looks like. Because if you don't, unfortunately, and for me, with my past experience, you actually learn to accept what is not acceptable. And unfortunately, ladies, it is not acceptable that your men sit there and go to fucking titty bars and do all that carry on whilst you're at home. You know, that's actually not acceptable. And then coming home and just getting back into life and thinking that it's okay, it's actually not. So, but I definitely want to go back and talk about insecurity, jealousy, self-worth, self-confidence, and I really want to delve into a lot more detail around identity. A lot of people these days, unfortunately, are looking for an identity. They're looking for someone to follow. They're looking for someone to be, when in actuality, you are who you are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the next conversation into next week's show.
Looking forward to that one.
But I absolutely want to say thank you so much, Unme. As usual, absolutely respect you and your time. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And until next week, thank you also, TZ Created, for your words of wisdom and spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, look, honestly, it's just about truth seeking. Ultimately, it's seeking the truth, because when you start seeking the truth, you start seeing the truth in everything. And unfortunately, most people can't see the wood for the trees when it comes to truth and how to apply it. Because once you get truth and you start applying it in your life, it starts changing your life from the inside out.
Yeah. And that's what we hear. We want to give you the truth. We want to give you the recipe to help you work through the everyday disruption and trials and tribulations that you face on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much. Again, tell me, I want to know what your momentum brushes are. Send me a message, send me a video. If you know of anybody that needs help, that needs a little bit of support, send our YouTube link, or even jump into our social, The Accountability Expert. Unme, you're on Instagram, Facebook?
Yep, I'm on personal Facebook, and also have my business page, and I have a group as well called the Transformation Tribe, if you want to join that. So happy days.
TZ Created across all platforms, especially iTunes and Spotify and Google Play. Go check out my music. Hopefully you love it. I know Americans are loving it because my music is charting in America on iTunes. It's in popular releases on Spotify. And I just want to say kupu ho for the show. Smile thinking.
Love it, love it, love it. And look, at the end of the day, this is why I created the Healing Well. It's a forum, it's a space for you to come and listen and hopefully take a few tidbits away that you can impart and put into action into your own life. That's why we're here. Stay tuned. Thank you so much to everybody that's jumped in and watching the show. Stay tuned for next week. It's a continuation. Watch this space. Take care, everyone. See you later. Bye.